VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker, and we are 9 days away from the NFL draft, a very pivotal event for these Vikings because we think they're going to draft a quarterback of the future. We think they're going to trade up for it. We're going to get Andrew Harbaugh's takes. He's new to the Viking space, I think. He's the boss at VikingsWire. Is that correct, Andrew?
That is correct. Yeah, I dabbled in it a little bit a couple years ago. Didn't get very far, but no, I'm very entrenched now, playing catch up here. Just got the job on April 1st. So
okay,
it's funny. I feel like Quessy, his first draft, same thing happened. He got thrown into the process very late. I'm playing catch up the same way. So let's see how my first draft does compared to his, though. Hopefully it's a little bit better.
Yeah, I was about ready to say, you probably want to break away from the chains of the past because most Vikings fans are very low on that draft. So here's to hoping that you're better than that. And don't trade with the damn Lions. That would be the advice from most Vikings fans. Josh, you're our mainstay guest, usually on Wednesdays. We got you Tuesday. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, 9 days away from the NFL draft. Really couldn't be better. It's a great time of year.
Yeah, and I know this has habitually been your thing. Out of all football stuff, we all have a specialty, and the draft is your thing. That's accurate, right?
I would say so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily say I'm an expert, but I like to pretend I am. So
your mock last year was pretty fancy, if I remember you telling me, in terms of accuracy, right?
Yeah, it was all right. It was decent.
Yeah, it held its own.
Could have been worse.
Yeah. All right, Andrew, since you're new to this show and to this Vikings digital space in general, is it accurate that you are not a Vikings fan?
I'm not.
Okay.
I live in Western Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Whole family Steelers fans.
Okay.
And I didn't have a favorite team growing up, but I had a favorite player in Steve McNair.
Okay.
And then he went to the Ravens, and I was told I had to not pick the Ravens. And I was like, okay, well, wherever my favorite college player goes is who I'm going to be a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 2007, and that was Brady Quinn. So I'm actually a Browns fan by heart. But I love the entire NFL. Like, anytime anybody does well, wins, there's different stories. The draft brings you into everybody. Like, I'm a Browns fan at heart, but I feel like I know about them the least because I try to know as much about everybody else and their doings.
Okay. All right. So we have a Browns fan who covers the Vikings on VikingsWire.com. It looks like Twitter is @MandrewNFL. We're going to launch into about 5 questions. We'll keep you for about 20 minutes. My first one, right after Kirk Cousins left, that was March 11th, the first day of legal tampering, which might not have been legal tampering. It might have been flat out tampering. The night of, we all went to bed, and then Sam Darnold was signed, seemingly in everybody's sleep. So I want to know from you and your objectivity, how good will Sam Darnold be in this Vikings offense, assuming he's the QB1? And give me like a stat line if he starts all 17 games.
Yeah, Sam Darnold QB1 in 2024 is not something I think a lot of people were betting or expecting to potentially hear. But here we are. It's the NFL and the beauty of it all. You never know what's going to happen. Last year being a shining example of it with all the quarterbacks you saw. Looking at Darnold, I think easily you could say the supporting cast, the coaching staff, is the best and most stable he could ever play with in his career outside of what he had last year with San Francisco, but he wasn't asked to be the starter there potentially. I think if you I was looking at his stat lines, I think 2019, kind of serves as the best indicator. Passed for 3,000 yards that year. Didn't even hit 20 touchdowns. He had 19, 13 interceptions, nearly 62% completion percentage. So a lot different than what Kirk Cousins has produced in recent years. I don't think you're going to be able to replicate that with probably anybody, even a rookie, if you trade up and get one. But yeah, I mean, I think Darnold is very much a bridge option here. And I think that was the point of signing him the same way you saw teams last year. You got Tyler Heineke going to Atlanta, serving as the bridge there when they were trying to figure out their situation. I think New England's going to do much of the same thing with Jacoby Brissett. So it's going to be a wait and see approach if you're a Vikings fan when the quarterback situation comes around after knowing what you were going to get with Kirk Cousins, good or bad, throwing behind the first down marker when you needed a first or not. But I think a very average year of quarterback play is in store for them in 2024.
Did you think letting Cousins walk at that price point to the Falcons was a mistake? for the Vikings, or was it a natural breaking point?
I don't. I think, and the joke is modern medicine, and you've seen like Rodgers nearly coming back from his Achilles injury. And his play style doesn't really affect his Achilles, I don't think either. But that being said, he is an older quarterback. I think the situation between the fans and the front office, you kind of want to get your own fresh start. Given that guaranteed money year after year and getting the same kind of real results, not really ever breaking through that ceiling. I think it was a good break. There's been way messier breaks, and there's been some that are way too soon in the NFL. I think that's one of the few examples you get where it was a perfect break at the right time.
Okay, fair enough. Josh, what do you got for Andrew Harbaugh, VikingsWire.com?
Yeah, Andrew. So before you were at VikingsWire, am I correct that you were also at LionsWire before that?
Yeah, I have a thing for the NFC North, as it seems.
Yeah, apparently. So that's going to be what my next question is based around. Looking a little bit outside of the Viking sphere here. What do you think is the Lions' biggest draft need heading into 2024 at that number 29 spot?
I don't think anyone, and it's under the radar because they didn't get any flashy signings. I don't think anyone has done a better job of addressing their roster needs and filling the holes that Brad Holmes and the Lions have this offseason. I think they could really go BPA at 29. There's not a lot of teams that can afford that. Chiefs and 49ers obviously being one of those are the two teams you have in the Super Bowl. Ravens even have some needs there picking at 30, but Lions really could go anywhere. When I was mocking them before I came over at the beginning of April, there was a lot of Zach Frazier. There was a lot of Darius Robinson, who I don't even know if he makes it at 29 now based on different things you're seeing with this edge class. Adonai Mitchell, they need somebody out receiver. I know they're moving Jamison Williams outside full time, but they need a big guy that can really. They had the Josh Reynolds type where he was the bigger one. You can get your first downs and stuff like that, but they need somebody else that Jared Goff can really go to in those situations. So I mean, really, I think it could be any of those. But that being said, it could be anything. I could also see them just trading back and being like, you know what? If somebody wants to come up and get a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix, if they fall that far, we'll gladly take the extra draft capital and keep hitting on all these draft picks. And that's the thing too. It's the lottery aspect and the reality TV show aspect of the draft that draws everybody in. And Brad Holmes is, like they always joke about the script. He has the script in recent drafts where he's just hitting on all these picks. And you see what that does for a team that can go from being the bottom of the barrel to being a rebuild to now being Super Bowl contenders 3 years into that rebuild. That doesn't happen very often.
For sure. And I mean, Darius Robinson definitely is a guy that I've been pegging as kind of the guy to look for at Detroit, just because of his versatility on that defensive line. But yeah, like you said, they could pretty much go anywhere. And trading down, I mean, you mentioned wide receiver. If you're going to trade down and go get a wide receiver, you're still going to get a really good player in round 2. So I mean, that would make a lot of sense as well. Do you think that Detroit's success in 2024 is more sustainable, or is it kind of like a Minnesota Vikings thing in 2022 where it's a flame out and then you're kind of rebuilding again?
I have a lot of faith in Dan Campbell. Like I joke on Twitter, you could probably, if you search my tweets, I would run through a wall for Dan Campbell about 100 times over. And I know Vikings fans, like I'm trying to introduce them to myself, and me hyping up this Lions team is doing a very good job of that. But
Thanks,
yeah,
John.
my bad.
But there's a reason that
Because we all wear blue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it did not correlate that at all. But now, good point here as we're standing. But they have aced the entire process. And I think a really big underrated aspect is Sheila Ford lets that team do what it wants to do. And I think the ownership being a little hands-on, but like a controlled hands-on. We're not talking to Mark Davis or, oh my gosh, owner of the Cardinals who can't get out.
Bidwell?
Yes, Bidwell.
There we go.
Thank you. Those are like the bad examples of what you don't want, essentially. She's the shining star of how you let a team fix itself and figure itself out. Because like the roster itself isn't that crazy. Like you're not going to pick them in Madden a lot, more or less. Like there's nothing flashy there, but they're probably going to win 12 games again. Ben Johnson's going to be a hot head coaching candidate again. And people are going to be all year being like, oh, time for Jared Goff. They're going to have to ship him away. They're going to have to start over a quarterback, but they're not going to have to. Like, it's just the consistency, and all the former players on that staff too, I think makes a big time difference. I think those contributing factors have that success to be sustainable.
I think that's exactly where they're at, where they're structurally sound from all the leaders you mentioned, plus the roster now, that they're kind of in the same vein of the 49ers pre-Purdy, where we really wonder, like, all right, after, let's say they get the postseason again, win a game or whatever, or even get to the NFC Championship again, we're going to wonder, all right, does this Goff character have the juice to get them over the top? I think that is what we are approaching with them. Kind of that 49erization of that team. But they love Goff. And it was really one of those unforeseen things that when the Stafford trade went down, I thought the night of, that throwing Goff in there was just like, we'll get this pain in the ass out of here, please. And then it turns out that they were like, he's not a pain in the ass. This guy's going to start. And they had multiple chances now. At this time on the calendar in the last, 3 years, Josh, we're like, I wonder if Detroit will get a quarterback. And they kind of did with Hendon Hooker, but it's never been like, all right, we're going to go get our guy to supplant Goff. It's kind of like, Goff is, and I figured that out last year. I was like, well, I'm not going to mock any quarterback to the Lions because they love Goff, and boom, they were in the NFC Championship.
Yeah, and they drafted Hendon Hooker too last year, which I thought was perfect backup situation where let him heal all year, don't rush him back from that ACL, and you still get somebody who looked like a Heisman winner before that injury in 2022. So, I mean, again, the roster building and the way they handle it. And I think, too, something everybody forgot about was just on the Lions front. Brad Holmes was part of the scouting department that drafted Jared Goff. So, like, those two trust each other going way back, all the way back to 2016. And I think that's very underrated. But to make it come full circle with the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, I think, once you get him a young quarterback to kind of work with and develop, he's a former quarterback himself. He's been all over the league. He knows how it goes. And I think that's where he can kind of connect with Darnold, where even O'Connell was a former Jet. He was on the Jets twice. So he knows what it's like. And I'm sure they're going to have good laughs about how horrible that market is to play in when the pressure's high. And clean slate coming to Minnesota, no expectations whatsoever. I think it would be interesting. Again, low expectations, tempered expectations, but I think there could be some positivity there.
All right, we are going to transfer from Lions now to VikesNow and start getting your predictions because the draft is April 25th. I want to know, Andrew, from your prediction standpoint, how much do the Vikings spend on this would-be trade up the board for, quarterback who we're going to ask you about right after this question?
I think they're going to have to send both firsts. I think they knew that when they acquired it, if they're going to make the move. And I think they're going to try to keep that first next year. I just don't know if they're going to be able to. And I think that's going to be – they're in a very tough situation that, again, they created themselves when they let Kirk Cousins walk, which, again, I still fully believe was the right approach. But it's one of those things where you've made your bed, you got to lie in it now. And if that means giving up 3 first-round picks, you got to give up 3 first-round picks. And the other thing, too, is – the reason I hope they don't have to do that is after that, they don't have a pick until 108.
Right.
And this roster, while they were very productive and active in free agency, there are still a lot of areas that have need that can be tinkered with and kind of finely tuned that can give them a full-fledged orchestra that sounds like it deserves to be heard and not just skipped over whenever it pops up on your Pandora playlist. But I think it's going to cost the 3 firsts, and I think that's not ideal, but I think, again, that's the lay of the land at this point.
Who will that be with? Which team?
I don't think it's going to be New England. I think New England, when they said how we want a haul, basically, was them politely telling everybody, go away without using more colorful language. We want to stay here and get a guy, whether it be whoever falls to them at 3, or maybe they get wild and they take a wide receiver to give Jacoby Brissett some sort of life. That doesn't mean Juju Smith-Schuster is your wide receiver 1. I don't know if it's going to be with Arizona either. I really think it's going to come down to the Chargers. I think Harbaugh likes that roster for some reason the way it is. That doesn't mean a top 5 pick added to it. I really think he's going to look to trade back, take an offensive lineman that falls, whether it be Fashanu or a Fuaga or a Fatanu, and be happy with whoever he gets there. I think that's the target there at 5, potentially 4, but my bet at this point is 5.
Okay. Josh, we got a natural springboard to your question here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we ask this every single time somebody comes on the show. Who do you ultimately think the Vikings are going to end up drafting in the first round?
I think it's going to be May. I think Drake May is going to be the one that falls. I think it goes, obviously, 1, Caleb. I think 2 is going to be Jane Daniels. I think McCarthy ends up a Patriot. And I think that'll scare off some people that May's left over, because I think he's kind of seen the same way Sam Howell was, where sophomore season looked lights out. Junior season, he loses his receiving core, basically falls off the face of the earth and becomes the value pick later. I think Drake made the same sense. He has better tools, and I think he's much better than Sam Howell was at that point when they both entered the draft. But I think May is going to be the one to get. I just don't know if he's going to be able to get traded for, essentially. It's going to be interesting to see who kind of goes up for him. And Adam Schefter said yesterday on their mock draft special that he's their preference. And I do have a piece on that on Vikings Wire. We will plug that now. But I'm okay with that. I think of the 4, like obviously you take out the top 2. I would rather have May than McCarthy, but I wouldn't be upset with either one of them. I think either one of them will be able to be just fine. And I think that's more the roster hiding their issues first versus them overcoming them.
Josh, would you, Josh Fry, be absolutely shocked if May slid to 4 or 5, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I think it would ultimately end up depending on how real it is that New England doesn't like Drake May and they ultimately take McCarthy instead. And if that ends up happening and that's real, then yeah, May's obviously the guy that probably would slide down the board, especially if Williams goes to Chicago like everybody thinks, Jaden Daniels goes to Washington like everybody thinks, and then yeah, May's the guy left over.
Okay. All right, Andrew, the final thing we got on your inaugural appearance here is you can you can cast aside the Vikings and hopefully the Lions, but I want a bold but quasi-realistic NFL draft prediction that nobody or too many have spouted about, something that we're not thinking about on the whole in the NFL draft.
I will continue my May slide here because this is where I think is going to happen. I think he eventually falls all the way to 9. I think someone trades up with Chicago because I think Chicago will be happy trading back and getting whoever they can have fall back to him. And because it's Chicago, it's not going to be Minnesota because Minnesota's not, or Chicago's not going to hand Minnesota, oh, hey, here, solve your quarterback problem so we don't have to deal with you for twice a year for the rest of our lives. But I think it's going to be a team like, I think Las Vegas wants to make a splash. I think Denver wants to make a splash. I think one of those teams, and I think Denver more so because I think Patton is really on the hottest seat of any general manager at this point because of just there's dumpster fires and then there's a landfill fire is what he did with the whole Russell Wilson contract. I think he's got to fix that. And I think the easiest way to do that and make people forget is make a splash with a rookie quarterback. So I think May falls to 9 and Chicago trades back and keeps Minnesota in the cold. Not that they're not used to that. And kind of we see a team like that that I mentioned, Denver or Las Vegas, somebody else along those lines that trades up.
So the Vikings would be left with what in that?
They'll be left with 2019 Sam Darnold at that point.
Okay. Yeah.
My goodness. All right. Well, I think I liked your first prediction better.
Oh, exactly. And I think for what it's worth too, and this exercise played out, the Wire editors were doing a mock draft right now. I took Michael Penix at 23. Mm-hmm. I think that's their, I say dream loosely. I think that's a dream scenario if they miss out on some of the top guys, is take somebody late at 23, get somebody like Terrion Arnold, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. I think you need to shore up the cornerback room big time because they've had a lot of misses in the secondary. Get one of those guys at 11, and then hopefully somebody like Penix is there at 23. I would not take Nix. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big Bo Nix guy. Like he got a 4th round grade from me, or day 3 grade is how I do him his days. I think Penix would be the ideal situation there at 23, where, again, you can run with Darnold for a little bit midway through the season if you need a change. I think Penix would be really fun and explosive in that offense.
Josh, is there anything we missed with Andrew Harbaugh?
I mean, I completely understand the Michael Penix idea. Just from a sense, like, if the Vikings end up trading both their first round picks this year and their 2025 first, they're going to go 3 straight drafts with just one top 100 pick. And that just doesn't feel all that sustainable.
Yeah. And I think that's looming in the back of their mind, where it's like, we can't really afford to do this if it's going to take that. And I think teams know that and are going to take advantage of it, because obviously you're always looking to eliminate whoever you can from competing against you, whether it be on the field or off the field. And I think if the Vikings do trade those, all those firsts and the first in the future, they're really just losing their foot and potentially all the way up to their kneecap at that point. And they can't afford to hobble their way through an off season anymore.
Right. And if you're gonna make that move to hit a quarterback, that quarterback better hit. Otherwise, you got
100%.
You got no draft capital to help them out with. Like, obviously they're in a decent situation right now, but in a couple of years that could be very different.
Yeah.
All
right. Mandrew NFL on Twitter or X. Andrew Harbaugh, Vikings Wire editor. Any closing arguments from you, sir?
No, I mean, just know that this Harbaugh is not as high on McCarthy as the other Harbaugh that's in the NFL landscape. But no, I mean, it's going to be very exciting. 9 days. And I think the Vikings are the straw that stirs the drink on draft day. And I think it's going to be very interesting. And it's a fun time to be a Vikings fan. You're on the edge of your seat and you don't know what's going to happen, but no matter what, week one's still going to roll around and someone's going to be under center. And whether you got to look forward to next draft or not, we'll be sure to cover it one way or the other.
I hear you, man. All right. We will hit you up after the draft, hopefully get a segment like this, and we appreciate it. First-time guest. So we'll talk to you in about a month, Andrew, if you're down for that, okay?
100%. Thanks, guys, for having me on.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day. Later,
You
Josh.
See you guys.